Hello, everyone. So, in today's episode of Talking to International Students, we have here with us Swaetha, and Swaetha is studying a very interesting course, which is astrophysics. So, this is first time that someone from astrophysics is in our video, and we hope to learn a lot about the domain. And I hope this video is going to be very useful and very helpful for people who are aspiring in this domain, and they want to pursue this domain, maybe masters or maybe PhD. So Swaetha is a PhD student. So a lot to learn from Swaetha in this video. We'll start with introduction. Swaetha, could I have a brief introduction from you?
Yeah. So first of all, hi everyone, and hi. Thank you for hosting me. It's very nice to be here and help people. So my name is Swaetha Ramkumar, and I'm a second year PhD student in astrophysics at Trinity College Dublin. So I think it's not fair as a student to say that I'm a student in astrophysics, because PhD is more research focused, and there are a lot of domains. So what I research on, or my research field, is called exoplanets, and I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with exoplanets. So just a second recap: exoplanets are just planets other than our solar system planets. So anything that is around another star is called an exoplanet. And so if you were to ask me if Earth is an exoplanet, maybe. If you were an alien and you were viewing it from another planet, for you it would be an exoplanet. So that's always fun to think about. And what I deal with is their atmospheres. So I use spectroscopy and telescopes to look at the atmospheres of these alien worlds and try and figure out if, potentially or hopefully, if we can have another Earth, find another Earth where we can live. So yeah, that's cool.
I am coming up with many questions. I'm very curious. So I was actually going to ask, did you actually find, do you have something where we have hope of a second Earth? And you mentioned that. So this discussion is going to be interesting. But before moving ahead, what has been your educational background before the PhD here? Did you have any bachelor's, and on what, and master's in what field? And how did you finally decide to do PhD? That journey, if you could share.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an international student, like you mentioned. So I'm from India. So from South India, from a place called Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu. So I did my bachelor's in Coimbatore in a university called Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham. So I did my bachelor's in physics. And then I got an opportunity to go to London, where I did my master's in astrophysics at UCL, University College London. And from there, now I'm here in Trinity doing a PhD.
Okay. So was it back to back, or you had any work experience in between?
No, it was all back to back.
Okay.
So I did my bachelor's in 2016. So 2016 to 19, 3-year bachelor's, followed by a year master's. So in the UK, master's is for 1 year. So I did 1 year there, and then my PhD now in 2021.
Okay. So you have been around 2.5 years in Trinity already, yeah? And so how has the course been? So for example, you have perspective of studying physics in India, and you have also studied in London, the masters, and now you're doing PhD. So you carry a lot of experience, the educational perspectives of how teaching is imparted in these three different places. So if
Yeah.
you could summarize on your viewpoint, how your experience has been while pursuing your courses.
So you mean throughout bachelor's?
Yeah, starting
Okay.
from there.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's actually a nice question. So in bachelor's, like in India, if you're familiar with in India, it's mostly based on courses. So it's a lot of extensive theory works, and you have 1 or 2 labs, especially if it's physics, if it's a bachelor's in physics. Again, it depends on the university you're enrolled in. But in my university, we had all 3 years of my bachelor's was completely filled with theory courses, and we had 1 or 2 labs. So one is a basic computer lab where you're taught either C++ or Python. We were taught C++, and that's very, very important for astrophysics. And then I guess we had obviously physics, because it was a physics degree, you will have physics labs as well. So we had like 2 or 3 physics lab, but most of it was focused on theory and how well you develop your theory skills in physics background. But we also had electives. I believe every college will have some set of electives towards the end of the 3rd year.
Yeah.
And we had, different electives. And because I was interested in astronomy from when I was in 2nd standard, to be very honest, that is when I was in 6 years. I went with astronomy. We had astronomy elective, and I went with that. And then in my master's in London, it was completely different. It was not just a culture shock, but also an educational shock, to be very honest, because the way Western people, I think, prioritize education is completely different from how we are taught throughout, our adulthood. So in masters, we had the thesis project, and for that you'll be interviewed. So it's not just going and showing your interest on a project to a professor, but rather you would go there and they'll interview you for like down 15-20 minutes to get to understand how much do you know and how much do you not know in that field. And based on that, they select you for your thesis project. So that was a big shock for me, because I didn't know, this interview culture was there very early from, in fact, from their bachelors. And because masters in UK and most of the European countries is just for 1 year, you have to do 180 credits in a span of 1 year, and it is very hectic. You'll have no time to do have a job, or take part-time jobs. So if you're enrolled as a full-time student, it's a lot of work. And for PhD, I don't want to say PhD is chill, mostly because research is based on you, how much you do and when you do. But you're given a lot of freedom. And initially, that freedom seems very nice, because you can work from home, you can go to the office, you can choose not to work on Mondays. That's your wish. But then how you utilize that freedom and how soon it all brings you down when you enter into your 2nd year is what's very important. But the Western education is completely different. They're more focused on, I would say, practical knowledge rather than more theoretical knowledge. But I believe a balance of both is obviously important. But this is a stark difference that I could find throughout my journey so far.
Yeah, really interesting answer. And in the last 2.5 years, so if you say basically about PhD when you were talking, so I was noting few points that I could later ask. So how is the PhD course structured? So when you say you have freedom, you have a lot of time free for yourself, and you have to organize yourself, you can take holiday on Monday. So how does it look like? Do you have classes, or how much of those classes, and do you have assignments, and how much do you have to dedicate your time for these? Maybe I'm not sure how that goes. Maybe you have to write thesis or something. So how does that go?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. That's actually a very important question. So PhD in Trinity is for 4 years. And I started my PhD in 2021, which means I'm in my 2nd year, 6 months into my 2nd year. So the way it's structured in Trinity for astrophysics, in the astrophysics department, is for the first year, right when you enroll and when you begin, you have a lot of responsibility and you have zero free time, which means you have to take 4 modules. So 2 compulsory modules and 2 other modules from master's courses, be it computer science, data science, physics. So you can pick any 2 elective courses from any department of your choice, but it should be approved by Trinity. And you need to finish all of those 4 courses. So that's basically 20 credits. So 5 each. And the 2 compulsory courses are part of your PhD journey. So one is teaching. So as part of a PhD, you will be an undergrad teaching assistant.
Okay.
So you'll have to assist in computational labs or theoretical labs in physics, things like that. And you have to do it for 3 years. So that's 50, if I'm right, it's 50 hours per year. That's a lot of workload.
Mm-hmm.
So your labs, you do it for 3 years, and your final year, fourth year, is completely and totally dedicated to writing papers and writing up your thesis.
Okay.
So in the first year, main difference is in the first year, you'll not only have to teach labs, assist labs, but you also have to take modules, so 4 courses, and complete them by your first year. So because after 18 months, which is 1.5 years into your PhD, you'll have an important exam, which is known as the PhD transfer exam.
Okay.
So basically, for 18 months, you're on probation.
Okay.
You're a PhD student, but you're on probation.
Okay.
So like you're just there. So after 18 months, you'll have this very important exam, usually during Feb or March, where you have to write a mini thesis. It's not a complete thesis, but a mini thesis, basically literature and results. So what work have you done for the 18 months? Do you have results? Are they good enough for you to continue your funding and continue your PhD for the remaining 2 years? That's the aim behind that exam.
Okay.
You have to submit that, and you have an oral exam. You'll have a viva. Like it's basically like a real end PhD viva. You have your supervisor, you'll have an internal and external, and you'll be asked questions. You have to present your results for 18 months, and you'll be asked questions based on that.
And are you required to have a published paper by those 18 months?
Yeah, good question. So the requirement for that exam, to appear for that exam or during that 18 months, is 3 things. So first, you need to have 75% attendance. So in Trinity for PhD, you have these things called PG seminars or postgraduate seminars. So basically, they're seminars where third and fourth year students, PhD students, present their research or result. And as a first year and second year student, you're allowed to attend, or you should attend, because you get to learn about the research going on in Trinity. And it's not just astronomy, but also physics as well. So you have to attend, and you need to have 75% attendance on those PG seminars. So the second criteria is you need to have, I guess, 50% or 60% marks in your exams that you take for the modules at the end of your first year. And third is you need to obviously, pass the final transfer review. But the first 2 things are important. And you also need to have your, teaching assistant hours filled in properly.
Okay. So first 18 months, this work, and then you have exam, and then you transition into maybe full-time PhD. What's that then?
Yeah. So after 18 months, you'll have the exam, and if you pass, which you will, so if you pass, you'll be a proper PhD student. So you won't be on probation. You'll move directly into your second year, and you'll be enrolled as a PhD student for your last 3 years.
Okay. And then in that period you have to write papers that should be published later.
Yes. So I think for Trinity, I'm not sure. But at the end of fourth year, the criteria for your thesis, the actual PhD thesis or dissertation, as they call, is for you to appear for that and pass your final PhD viva, is to have, I think, 3 or 4 published papers as first authors. So not as a second or third author, but as a first author, you need to have 3 or 4 publications.
Okay, is that tough? That sounds tough.
Yeah, that actually, because people think 3 or 4 papers is manageable. You have 4 years, so you can do 1 paper each year and you'll have 4.
Yeah.
But it's actually really tough, because you're competing against not just your own colleagues, but you're also competing against the same research team in other universities, in other countries, So, and that's, if you look at it, it's a huge deal, because sometimes people can, or a research team can, publish the result before you do.
Yeah.
which case that paper is gone, right? You can't
Yeah.
publish that.
Yeah.
So things like that tend to happen because it's academics and you can't do anything about it, but
Yeah.
it's really hard.
So how is the success rate? So are most students able, or most PhD researchers able to complete in 4 years? They're able to complete those 3 to 4 publications in time?
Yeah, most of them, I think they do. Some of them have, in very rare cases, in very, very rare cases, they are not able to. And you can request for maybe an extension
Hmm.
or things like that. In some cases, you can have situations where, you're just not able to do, not because you cannot, but
Hmm.
you're in a situation where you're not able to do at that particular time, say medical reasons or
Yeah.
emergencies, family emergencies. So
Hmm.
in that cases, obviously, you can contact, the relevant person, and if that case is valid, you will get an extension or you will get the required help that you need. So, but mostly, yeah, they tend to manage. But I think what it depends on is your funding,
Hmm.
because depending on what kind of funding or who is funding you for your 4 years, that funding is mostly only for the 4 years, right?
Yeah.
So if you by any chance have an emergency and you get an extension to submit your thesis, after a month or 2 months, after the deadline, you can, but the thing is, who is funding you? Because your fund is gone by the 4 years. And what about that 1 month? You know,
Yeah.
how do you get the extension for your funding? Or do you have to self-fund for that month or for that extension period? So I think that's what's very important for everybody who's doing a PhD in the end.
By funding, do you mean the monthly stipends, financial support that you get, or is there
Yeah,
something else?
that's a good question. I forgot to mention. So my PhD is funded by Trinity. So it's this award called the PhD Provost Award or the Provost PhD Award. So it's an internal funding by the university.
Hmm.
So I get so basically by funding I mean, you have to pay your course fees,
Hmm.
your degree fee for every year, right? So if you're a master's student, you have a set amount that you need to pay for 1 year or two
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So that's how it is for PhD as well. So if you get a scholarship or if you're funded, that's a scholarship. They pay your fees, the 4 years of your PhD, the degree fees get paid by that particular funding source. And in this case, for me, Trinity. And they not only pay you for the 4 years, but you also get a monthly stipend, like you mentioned.
Hmm.
And yeah, that you get a monthly stipend, and that stipend is, well, if I'm telling you the truth, or mostly what's going on in the real world right now, is you must have heard as a Trinity
Yeah.
student as is the funding that PhD students get paid is very, very low.
Yeah.
So, and that with increasing rent costs now with inflation, it's just not enough for you to sustain. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. But the good thing is you don't have to pay any of your course fee. That is covered.
Yes, that is, yeah.
Okay.
So it's like a huge thing taken off your head. So you can
Hmm.
focus solely on your research and producing results.
Okay. And so are all the PhD researchers covered by that provost award, or you had to?
No. So this was so the Provost Award, how it works is for Trinity is they have one award allocated for one project per department.
Okay.
So for the entire physics and astronomy department, you just have one, or for the physics or the astronomy department, you just have one award for one project. And
Okay.
that project happened to be my supervisor's project.
Okay.
So, and it was something that I was interested in, exoplanets, and I just applied to that
Yeah.
particular project. But it's very competitive because if you can imagine, you'll have a lot of people applying to the same project
Hmm.
as well. So
Hmm.
it is really competitive. But I think this is for international students,
Hmm.
but for like Irish students and things like that, they have a different set of funding, like, Irish Council funding and things like that, which I'm not really, to be honest, I'm not very familiar with. But
Yeah.
with international, we have the PhD Provost Award.
But would that mean for international students, maybe there would be few others at least whose college fee is not paid and they have to pay themselves?
Yeah, some of them, if So it depends on the person. Some of them, I don't know, for some reason they choose to have their PhD to be self-funded. And like you mentioned, self-funding means you pay for your PhD. And but most, if not everybody, always should prefer, your PhD to be funded,
Yeah.
because you never know what can happen in any case, at any point in your life. So it's always good to have that huge weight lifted off,
Yeah.
doing something very intensive like a PhD.
Yeah.
But yes, some of them do choose to have it to be self-funded.
Correct. Also, from your profile, because you have been studying back-to-back bachelor's, then master's in London, and then PhD now. So, how has how did you financially support yourself? So, because this is a major concern especially for students coming from India or these countries, and when the main barrier, even if they're interested in pursuing PhD or higher studies, is probably the finances. So how did you manage? Because you must have spent uh,
Yeah, a
while
lot.
there's also, so just right after masters you have pursuing PhD. Although that's a good thing that you got that provost award which covers your expenses, but still there would be some amount of financial load. So how did you manage?
So for my masters, I I obviously struggled because, so for my masters, being honest, I funded my own. That is my family basically
Yeah.
funded for my education for my masters, because the scholarships in the UK for Indian students were very less at that time, and they were also very competitive. So unfortunately, I was not given a scholarship spot,
Yeah.
which could help me fund my master's, not even a partial scholarship. So I had to, and I'm not sure if maybe this is the right time to mention. So I believe, we have to, as international students, write IELTS, for your master's, if you want to pursue, anything abroad, right? So what I didn't know then, but what I would like to share to people who are watching this is, so they're aware, is IELTS based on what center you write or choose to write, such as say British Council or IDP. There are two centers for IELTS, right? You have British Council and you have IDP. So British Council offered, I think in 2019, 2020 time, which is when I went for my master's. So they offered scholarship based on your IELTS score. So if you get an IELTS score or band of say 8 and above, or 8.5 and above out of 9, you get a specific amount of scholarship that will help you study abroad in the UK for, I guess, selected universities. But in case of IDP, they did not have any scholarships like that. They
Mhm.
did, but in that time, 2019, 2020, they removed all of the other scholarships. So it's very important that it's not just the university that can help you, but it's also the external source, such as the IELTS agency, that can help you. So it's very important to do your research,
Yeah.
especially in terms of finance, because it'll
Mhm.
help you a lot.
Oh,
But yeah,
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I mean, yeah, for my master's, I didn't have any scholarship because I didn't know about,
Mhm.
British Council and IDP then, and I chose IDP,
Yeah.
and I didn't have any scholarship. So even my university, my scholarship application was rejected, unfortunately. So my family had to fund, and the UK was really expensive.
Yeah.
So I made a point to apply to just one university, because applications charges are also expensive, right?
Yeah.
You have to pay 10K per application. So
Mhm.
I just applied to one university, and thankfully I got the scholarship for PhD. So that's good.
Oh, you had to pay 10K for scholar.
For my master's, yeah.
So 10K.
So no, 10K Indian rupee.
Okay.
not, not euro.
Okay.
No, no, yeah.
Cool. So I was thinking about IELTS. So last, because just right before coming here, I had written my IELTS, and if I remember correctly, somewhere I had read that IDP was taking over all the IELTS exams. So I'm not sure if that's right now that's still the case, that British Council and IDP are still operating and having the exams and the IELTS exams. But anyway, whoever is watching, that's a good information that you said that British Council also supports like that. But currently, who is
Yeah,
working there, they have to pay.
thanks. Like you mentioned, if I mean, no matter who hosts it, I
Yeah,
think it's obviously nice for your mental check to have
yeah,
to do some research,
yeah,
because in some cases you might not know, because all of these
yeah,
things would be far below the web page or
yeah,
website.
yeah,
So it's very important that you just Google search scholarships,
yeah.
IELTS, India. So it's very important.
Okay. So since we were talking about the financials, I want to ask one more question. Since you were mentioning it was quite packed, your master's as well as your currently your PhD. So did your course allow you time to maybe work in part-time jobs?
You mean master in during my master's?
Yeah, both of these you can say.
So during my master's, no, honestly, no. Because like I said, 180 credits on paper might seem
Yeah,
not a big deal, like you can manage, but it is very extensive, because the moment you get moment you're done with an assignment on a module, you're given another two
yeah,
assignments on two different modules, and all of them have, a week after week deadline.
mm,
So it's really difficult. You have no time for yourself, because you also have to, live by yourself. So which means you need
yeah,
to cook and things like that.
yeah,
Uh, so yeah, I did not have, for me, honestly, I did not have any time to have part-time jobs. And in my university, during the orientation, they actually kind of made it clear that, you might want to do a part-time job. Just be aware that if you do, you might be compromising heavily on your final grade, or
yeah,
the distinction, whatever you get, that you'll be compromising. So yeah, that was like a warning to us,
yeah,
but it actually turned out to be true. It was scary then, but then when you finish your first year, you are like, wow, how did that time all go by?
yeah, true. Um, Actually, from that, I remember before even coming here, when I was watching, I think there was some video put up on the website of Trinity about my course, and the
Okay.
course director said this, that same thing that you said. So even before coming, we were born on video.
Yeah, okay, yeah, same. Yeah.
Okay. So that's that. And yeah, so because you have lived in London, so I tend to ask this, how did you find the cost of living if you compare Dublin and London?
Oh my God. Don't get me started. I actually thought London was more expensive
Mm,
than Dublin, but when I came to Dublin, it's opposite. So Dublin is quite expensive
mm,
compared to the UK, especially London.
mm,
Uh, but yeah, but because it's a PhD and you have a stipend, and I'm someone who, I cook my own
yeah,
lunch, whatever.
yeah,
So I don't spend money on, buying food and stuff. So it's manageable over here. But when I was in London, because all of my financial was coming from my family,
mm,
you not really have that guilt, because you don't want to spend much, and
mm,
it's your parents' money, right? And they worked hard.
yeah,
But otherwise, also everything from groceries to rent was very expensive. And it was the pandemic time as well then.
yeah,
2020, 2019 end was the peak pandemic time. So
mm,
people didn't know what was going on. So it was a huge mess. Both it took I would say it took not only a physical toll, but also a mental toll on a lot of people, international students who were there,
yeah,
because you didn't have access to food, you didn't have access to a lot of things, and you were also not able to go back to your home country. So, and plus you also had to, do your coursework, and you had to finish your project, your
yeah.
thesis. So it was a huge thing. But cost wise, I would say Dublin is more expensive than London.
And which part is costlier? The rent is costlier in Dublin or the usual expenses, groceries, etc.?
I think it's more the rent, but also now I guess the groceries also
Inflation,
started
yeah.
to the
Yeah.
usual, yeah.
Mhm.
Because of inflation, but the rent is, I feel, is more expensive.
Yeah, okay. And because you mentioned your this time, COVID time, so did you get any support from your college or the UK government while you were a student there?
So in terms of courses, yes, so most of our modules, the professors, they allowed us to, take time because most of us were international students and there were a lot of crises going on, not just COVID, but a lot of things going on. So we had, deadlines which were pushed, and then thankfully our exams were all made online. So we could all go back home and, take the online exams in the safety of, our country and our house. So that was actually a good thing. So yes, they did support us. And we also could, request extensions for our final thesis.
Yeah.
And that was also good. So the supervisors were also very supportive.
Okay. And how do you compare? So you mentioned University College London was your master's college. How do you compare Trinity College Dublin and University College London in terms of one, infra, two, faculty, and three, experience as a student?
Well, I don't think you can, compare different universities,
Yeah.
my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But because you asked, in terms of infrastructure, Trinity is, I think UCL and Trinity are almost similar because you don't have the campus is not based on one main building. You have lots of different buildings spread out
Okay.
towards an area, right? So that's how UCL is also is. So just like Trinity, you have like a main building.
Yeah.
Um, that means, that's obviously publicized to people. So that's UCL, just like Trinity has the main
Yeah.
entrance, you have a UCL entrance as well. But similarly, again, to Trinity, they have different buildings and departments over a huge range. And actually, in fact, now that I think about it, in terms of infrastructure, both of them are similar because
Yeah.
UCL is also in the center of London and
Mhm.
Trinity is in the center of Dublin.
Yeah.
So it was accessible. You have lots of, not just transport wise, but in terms of, pharmacies or regular day-to-day food and stuff, everything was accessible. So both of them are similar in that sense. Then as a student, like a student experience, I would say, I mean, I don't think I can do justice by comparing my student experience because I'm doing two different courses.
Yeah.
And because I was a master's student there, I had to go to different buildings and basically explore different buildings and different lecture theaters and, classrooms. But in Trinity, we just had, again, Trinity, my PhD was also during the pandemic, towards the end of the pandemic in 2021. So most of the lectures were online. So we didn't really have the opportunity to go to attend, in-person lectures. So in that sense, it was a bit limited. But I would say student experience is good in both of these.
Okay.
For some reason, I feel Dublin is not, widely known compared to London,
Mm.
to most students in India at least.
Mhm.
But I would say if you come here, it's actually a really good place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's relatively newer place for higher studies compared to
Yeah.
existing London's and other places. But a quite balanced answer. You did not turn down any of the side. So some people tend to have some soft corner for their maybe previous one because when they remember that they like it, but because they are going through some tough
Yeah.
times here, they don't seem to like it. So generally people prefer the previous one, but quite balanced answer that you gave. Cool. Uh, One more question since you on your teaching assistant part. So, is that an added stress to have to be a teaching assistant? Maybe in terms of the course that do you have a choice while selecting which course you want to teach, or you are assigned something that you have to maybe spend some extra time yourself to be able to deliver what you are required to? And secondly, are you paid for being the teaching assistant?
Yeah, all of them are really great questions. So first, I think you asked about, sorry, my memory is a bit jerky. I think you asked about
Ah,
how is it
cool.
stressful?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I would say, well, it is not really stressful. I think in during the first year, at some point it does get to your head because you have to balance your research, teaching assistant job as well as your modules as well. So all three at once, you will have assignments, exams, but you also have to teach and you also have to do your research. So yeah, that can actually take a huge toll on your mental health, especially if you're an international student, because you're also away from your family. So you have a lot of personal and family related issues also going on, right? But I don't think just focusing on the teaching assistant being stressful is fair for me to say, because I think it's all these factors during your first year that makes it more stressful. And what was your second question? Sorry.
Is it paid?
Yeah. So teaching assistant was we TAs, we were not paid until last year. So Trinity only started paying us after heavy demand from my second year. Yeah. From this Feb onwards. But
Yeah.
now it's paid. It wasn't, but now it's paid.
And that's apart from your monthly stipend.
Yeah, it is apart from that.
Oh, that's good. Cool. So most of the questions went in their own lines. I did not, I had not prepared for these questions because it kept coming and I was interested, so I kept asking. So we'll next, we have almost covered most of the points. What is the career aspect after generally for people studying, doing PhD in astrophysics? How do you see your career going forward?
Yeah.
I know it's a little tough question, but generally, what are the options? I'm not specifically for you, I'm asking. It's generally for people who are pursuing PhD in astrophysics. What do they generally think of as a career option?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say, that's a tough question. I was just laughing because it reminded me of aunties back home asking me the same thing every time I go on vacation home. But yeah, it's something you need to think about, right? Eventually. So after your PhD, mostly people who really if you've liked your PhD experience so far, you would tend to, your next step would mostly be do a postdoctoral. So postdoc or a fellowship in Europe, in astrophysics, or I would say not now. I mean, after your PhD, you won't just be calling it astrophysics, but whatever subject you're doing it on. So for me, exoplanets. For someone else, it could be galaxy. For someone else, it could be solar physics or stellar physics based on stars. So you would do a postdoctoral, which I think is mostly for 4 years, and you would be an independent researcher. So kind of like the assistant professor job, but you'll be only focusing on your research. So you'll not have any side distractions and stuff. And after your postdoc, you can either transition into a full-time professor, or mostly you'll start out as an assistant professor and then move forward. But yeah, after that, even I'm not still sure about, but this, after your PhD, if you're still interested in this academic related thing, you would do a postdoc or a fellowship. Otherwise, if some of your PhD experiences were bitter and not good, and you don't want to continue in this path, you would go with the normal general path, which is go for a job. And because you have a PhD in this stream called astrophysics, people usually say that finding jobs would be easy, and some would say finding jobs won't be easy. But I would say it just depends on what kind of skills you've gained for that particular job that you're applying from your PhD, right? Because PhD in astrophysics is not just this physics and astronomy stuff that you get, but also communication skills and how good you are at doing independent research. That is basically the two main goals or outcomes from a PhD in any subject. So you can, your career jobs would then be, I don't know, work in IT, work in any other job that you would want to work in. Yeah, maybe, why not? Yeah, as well.
Okay, so this postdoc that you said, again, 4 years, are you paid at par with the assistant professors in that role?
I'm not really sure how much you're paid or what is that level.
Because you said it's like assistant professor without any distraction. So I thought distraction might be teaching full time.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I would say it would be a bit less than the professor title, but it would maybe mostly be a bit better than what you're paid during your PhD for sure.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
So that means you are planning to do postdoc.
So far, with my mentality, yes, that's the aim.
Cool, cool. All the best for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are almost done. Last section is your tips to newcomers. So I think you have a lot of experience in terms of this your field, astrophysics, plus in general higher studies that people will be looking for. So you can give your suggestion, anything, starting from, if you want to be specific to your field, that's okay. If you want to be generic and just want to give some suggestion, which they can follow even if they are not from astrophysics, and that applies to them. Yeah, you can give your suggestions now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you for saying that I have a lot of experience. It just makes me happy. but but I would say the first, it's not a tip, but like, I don't know, a crying shoulder, you can call me, for everybody that I've told so far is um is this: it's okay if you do not have internships during your bachelor's or during your master's. If you're applying for a PhD, or you're in your BSc and you're applying for a master's. So at least for astrophysics, from my experience, right, everybody will have different experiences, so I'm saying from my experience, it's okay if you do not have any high profile internships or things like that. You've not volunteered, you've not worked at ESO, NASA, you've not worked anywhere like that. It's totally fine, because you're looking at a live example here. That is me. I did not have any big internships or actually, I didn't have any internships, if I'm being very honest with you. So then you will ask me, okay, if you don't have anything, if you don't have papers published as well, then how did you get in? Or what is the criteria? Because that is also very important, right? So honestly, I don't know how they select, but based on my experience, I would say what they look for is a candidate who's very honest, at least for a PhD. During my PhD interviews with different universities, what they look for is someone who's very honest. And it could also be for your master's. By honesty, I mean, if you don't know, say, programming, if you know programming, but you're not, someone who's born with that skill, or if you don't know certain theory aspects of this subject, it's completely okay. What all they want from you is for you to communicate that to that particular supervisor or that professor directly. So just imagine, I mean, if you're hiring someone, just imagine hiring a person who, says, sugarcoats things and says they know everything, but you hire them and then you find out that they actually don't know. They have, they lack certain skills. And that would be a very hard thing to develop at that particular level. So it's very important that you let them know not only what your strengths are, but also what your weakness is.
Yeah.
And that is what I did with my PhD application. And the second thing they look for is this thing called motivation letter, or I don't know what is the other term, like a
SOP.
Yeah, SOP. Yes, yeah, SOP. That's right. They look for that. And what you've written in that, you don't have to be extra emotional, extra cheesy, or things like that. You just, again, have to be very honest. So just let them know, I've done this. I have skills based on the modules that I've studied during my, bachelor's or master's, but I don't know this particular skill. Even if it's something that I'm applying for, I don't know that skill. But you have to mention that you're, eager to learn. So you can say that, I've looked at courses from the university or the department that I'm applying to, and I see that you offer courses that I lack in. So, if I get a chance to be selected to be your student, I would definitely apply for those courses so that I can develop my skills. So you just have to be very clear. They look for consistency, very clear mind, and most importantly, mention your weakness as well, not just your strengths. But if you're mentioning your weakness, make sure that it's a weakness, or you mention something that you are, ready to learn from, not just say, this is my weakness, I don't care.
Yeah.
So you have to tell them that this is my weakness, I know it, I'm aware of it, and I also want to work on it. So that's something they look for.
Okay. Those were really I think will be helpful tips for people aspiring for higher education here. My last question, two last questions actually. Uh, First thing, did you have any advantage because you studied your master's in London and then you were applying for PhD in Ireland? So did it help in any way? For example, if someone is directly applying from India, they have done bachelor's and master's in India, and they are applying for PhD, will you have an advantage? And they're applying in Trinity. So will you have an advantage because you have a master's from London and they have not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think that is the case. So I had three interviews overall for my PhD position. So I applied to like four different places. I was rejected from one, and then I was, accepted for the interview from all the other three places. And they don't really look at, if they don't really see having a master's or having a bachelor's in another country as an advantage, because they tend to ask questions based on your home country. Because after all, in their eyes, even if you've done your master's in another country, you're still an Indian, you're still, an international student. So they just want to know how and if you can, adapt to a different country. So the question I was asked was, you've done your master's in London, that's fine, but how are you going to adapt to Ireland? How are you going to adapt to, say, France or say Switzerland? How is that difference going to affect you or impact you in your work? So in that case, I really don't think it matters if you've where you've done your bachelor's or master's from.
Okay. Does it help you in terms of maybe securing some scholarships because your master's is maybe, although they have come out of European Union now, UK, but let's say you had a European master's degree and then you are applying for PhD in Europe. So does it help you in any way getting scholarship compared to people who are from directly coming from India in that perspective, if you have any idea?
So I really don't think so. Because ultimately for scholarships and funding for your PhD, what's important is obviously the motivation letter, your interview, and the main thing is references. So you need two or three references from your previous supervisors. So most of my references were from my Indian supervisors and Indian professors
Yeah.
in my, BSc college. So it doesn't matter if you've done where you've done, even for your funding. Again, I would say it only depends on the references, people who are genuinely willing to give good references for you. But the other thing, because you mentioned that I forgot to mention in the tip, is you can look for open, not many people are aware of this. Experiences from people I've spoken to is if there's a very good and authentic website that you can search for open PhD positions, and it's not just PhD, but also postdoc and other positions. So it's called AAS Registry, American Astronomical Society. So you just type AAS registry and they have a job listing. So you have lots of different fields. In that, you'll find PhD or postgrad, pre-postdoc positions. So over there, you'll have a list of funded and available open PhD positions, not just in the UK, but also in some in US, as well as other European countries as well. So that's actually a very, very good website to check. And this is only for, astrophysics.
Yeah. Really nice of you to mention that. Really nice information. I have noted it down. Maybe I'll put it in the description. And yeah, so the references part you were mentioning, did you, for PhD also, you gave reference from India? You did not have to give references from your master's time?
I had to as well. So for PhD, I gave references from my references were my MSc supervisor. So your MSc supervisor is the main person that
Yeah.
they first read, because it's the degree that you've just finished, right? And the other reference was my BSc bachelor supervisor. So for my master's, because I went from India to UK, all of my references were from my Indian professors.
Okay. All done. Last question. Do we have a possibility of second Earth?
I mean, why not? Maybe not now, but you never know. Nothing is impossible, right? So, but the only thing I would say is it's very hard to find habitable planet or life in any planet, and the only reason why it's hard to find, say, water or oxygen or molecules like that are indicator of life is,
Yeah.
it's a very complicated science, but the only like the in a gist, it's just when you're observing from a telescope, when you're observing another planet or a system which has a planet from a telescope, you will not just have water and oxygen and all of these molecules in our in the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah.
You'll also have it in that planet's, in that star's atmosphere. So sometimes it could be a false indication, because you might find water molecule, you might find indication of life, molecules that are indicators of life, but they might be coming from our own planet's atmosphere.
Mm.
And that's like a big, kind of like a big difficulty in knowing whether a planet is going to host life or if it's not going to host life. But again, yeah, like I said, it's very hard, but nothing is impossible. We can always believe. You never know.
Okay, from that hope point, let's end the discussion. It was really nice talking to you. I asked many questions which I had not prepared because it was really interesting. I was hosting, as I said before, first time I was hosting someone who is from this background. It was really interesting to me, and I really hope this is equally interesting for people who will watch this video. And so nice to host you today. Any last word if you have?
Just thank you so much for having me. It was very nice. It was a very nice chat that I had with you, and I really hope it helps people who view this. And if it does, I'll be the happiest person. So thank you so much.
Same here. Okay. Thank you. See you again. Bye-bye.